Thank you, Madam Chair. The redistribution proposal for Northern Ontario represents a massive disruption in political representation. It arbitrarily breaks apart communities of interest and is predicated on the fundamentally flawed proposition that even though that Northern Ontario's population has grown since the last boundary changes, it isn't growing as fast as the explosive population growth in suburban, urban Southern Ontario. And so from this flows a second false promise that rural Ontario is now somehow overrepresented in Parliament and must give up a seat to accommodate suburban, urban South. The impacts on the rights of rural residents to representation will be immense. Our ridings are already massive in area. My riding, circonscription, is bigger than France. These immense ridings actually have populations that are comparable or larger than many rural regions in Canada. My riding has the same size or is larger than 44 other ridings in the country, and yet I'm told that I don't have enough people in my riding to deserve representation. The issue we're concerned about is removing the riding of Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing is going to have a domino effect on already untenably large ridings that are difficult to represent. And our region of northeastern Ontario, with a population that is rural, Indigenous, and Franco-Ontarian, will never be able to keep up with the huge population growth expected in the coming years in southern Ontario. So if we accept the premise of this change, it means in future years, our regions will have to give up more seats in order to accommodate the expected growth. In the first round, the Boundary Commission stated its intention to create the riding of Kiiwetinoong-Mushkegowuk. This was an arbitrary line on the map that created a riding so massive you could fit 100 other Ontario seats into it. This was obviously a ridiculous proposition. So it was fair to expect that in the second round, the Commission would come up with minor changes and respond to feedback. The problem was they ignored consensus from across the region and presented in the second round equally dramatic and arbitrarily new boundary lines that are now threatening to break apart many of the regions and communities that have been together culturally, economically, socially for decades. In my riding, for example, the Commission ignored suggestions on how to increase population, and in the second round arbitrarily moved the line 130 kilometers north of where it is now, which cuts the Francophone region of Temiskaming in half and moves numerous communities out of their traditional centre. And there is no consultation, and now there's no ability for those communities to speak, because this was done in the second round. The Commissioners ignored their obligation, as laid out in Section 15(1)(b), that states that several factors must be considered, such as community of interest, of identity, or the historical pattern of electoral district in the province, a manageable geographic size for districts in sparsely populated rural and northern regions of the province, and that they have under Section 15(2) the right to depart from population parity in order to maintain manageable geographic size for districts in sparsely populated rural and northern regions of the province. We already suffer from a high level of political alienation in Northern Ontario. We are in a very fragile time for democracy, and we must do our best to reassure citizens that their voice counts and that they are being heard. This is why I recommend, along with my colleagues, status quo for the communities and electors in Northern Ontario.